Hi, this is Jenny Cochran again with Fullness of Grace, and today we have Father Quan Tran speaking on the 7 deadly sins. So, Father Quan, I'd like to learn more about the 7 deadly sins.
Right. And I think this subject is very appropriate during the season of Lent, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a season where we're called to conversion, to metanoia. So first we have to acknowledge our sinfulness, our sins. We have to know our sins, and that to be contrite for them, and then to turn around, to ask for forgiveness, and to make amends, to try to improve, right? A turnaround, a change in direction, a change in lifestyle. And so it's a constant battle that we have to go through. But during Lent, we're given this time specifically to convert in a deeper, more profound way. So I think this helps all of us to understand about the 7 capital sins, or deadly sins that they're called, to see where we are, see which ones affect us the most, so that to know our tendencies, because we know that the enemy knows our weaknesses, and so that's where he's going to exploit, right? And so I think it's good for us to know our weaknesses, our tendencies, so that we can work on those areas.
Sounds great. So which is the first deadly sin
So
that you'd like to talk about?
The first one is pride. There's this list, it comes down from a lot of doctors of the church, Thomas Aquinas. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today comes from Thomas Aquinas. And Aquinas and everyone else identifies pride as probably the worst of all the sins. The worst of all the sins. And also Thomas Aquinas identifies pride as the mother of all sins. It's behind all the other sins. It's the reason, the basis for committing all the other sins. So pride is the first and the worst of the deadly sins. And because Thomas Aquinas is saying that it's an overarching sin, that he uses vainglory for the first one. It's very similar to pride, and so I kind of combine both for the first one, pride and vainglory. They're similar, but there's a difference as well. So pride is basically having excessive self-esteem, thinking too highly of oneself, and it's in its fullest sense, it sets one in opposition to God, right? To say that I'm so good, and that I don't even need God. It's rebelling against God, because one thinks too highly of himself. So that's pride. Vanity is close to that. Vanity is about wanting people's attention, wanting praises and honor, wanting to be noticed, to show off what I have, whether it be my looks or my skills or something like that. I'm just kind of preoccupied with impressing others, wanting to make a good impression, because the reality is we are weak, we are fallen, and we need God's grace and His mercy. We, of course, can respond to God's grace, that we are called to contribute, to respond, to cooperate with God's grace. So, of course, we do everything we can, but everything good that we can do, even the desire to do good, comes from God as gift. And so today, as I talk about the 7 deadly sins, I'm also going to talk about the opposite virtue. So that's, so that it can help us to identify if we see that pride is a part of our problem, vainglory, then we can practice the opposite virtue to kind of even it out. So the opposite virtue of pride is humility. And humility is to recognize our weaknesses, our limitations, and our complete dependence on God for everything. And that just sets everything straight and put everything in the right order.
It seems so difficult in today's world, because people, it seems like they're all trying to outdo the other, to be more beautiful, to be more successful, and all that. So how do we go about life, where we're trying to be humble and trying to succeed?
Right, and that is the problem, with today's world, is that we're trying to impress everybody. I think there's a lot of vanity, a lot of vainglory, especially in Southern California. We have to admit, people can be so superficial. They place such an importance on looks and wealth and status and impression. And so I think you just have to be honest with yourself. Just to be honest, just be who you are. So I'll talk about some of the offsprings too. So one reason why they're called capital vices or deadly sins is because they're considered the head. They give birth to other sins and vices. So pride will give birth to dishonesty, to bragging, right? Exaggerating one's gifts, one's credentials, what accomplishments, and also hypocrisy, right? Pretending to be somebody you're not, right? We want to impress the other person. We want to, we have a fancy car. We want to, outdo the neighbor, outdo the Joneses, keeping up with the Joneses and stuff like that. And I think you just have to be honest. It's okay to to not to be better. You don't have to be better than the other people. You don't have to compete all the time. We all have different gifts. We all have different blessings, and so it's okay to acknowledge somebody else is better looking or richer or more talented. So I think just honesty is really important, and just being comfortable with who you are. We all have weaknesses and strong points, right? Nobody's perfect, and so we shouldn't pretend to be perfect and to have it all.
Sounds good. I did have one great quote on humility from Thomas Kempis. This is from The Imitation of Christ. The more you know and the better you understand, the more severely will you be judged, unless your life is also the more holy. Do not be proud, therefore, because of your learning or skill. Rather, fear because of the talent given you. If you think you know many things and understand them well, realize at the same time that there is much you do not know. Hence, do not affect wisdom, but admit your ignorance. Why prefer yourself to anyone else when many are more learned, more cultured than you? I thought that was interesting. So.
It's so true, right? No matter how high you achieve, how great you are, there's always somebody better than you. And you have the truth is, where did that all come from, right? I mean, it ultimately comes from God as gift. It's all grace. So we shouldn't take credit for that, and we should be humble to God and be grateful for whatever we have. Some of us may be very smart, very talented, very successful, but we shouldn't take credit ourselves. We should give credit where credit is due, to God for all His gifts.
Okay, great. So what is our second deadly sin?
So the second one is greed. So greed is this inordinate love of money and material wealth. And so, the New Testament talks about that this greed, this craving, this love of money is the root of all evil, right? And so it's this inordinate desire for more and more that clouds our judgment, that makes us choose things that are sinful, that leads us in the wrong direction. And so it feeds on itself too. It just keeps going, right? The more you have, the more you want. It's endless. It's an endless cycle. It's never enough. And you have to have a better car, a bigger house, a bigger salary, or more money, more things, more toys, more gadgets, the latest things all the time.
And then you're weighed down with the burden of trying to keep that up, and earn more, like you said, and to even pay for what you've got. It's just like a weight of you're dragging around all those riches. So. Right,
and it's extremely selfish too. It's this sense, this completely. This extreme individualistic sense where I'm free to do whatever I want, to accumulate as much as I want, regardless of the consequences, regardless of any social responsibility, right? It's just me and my world and how much I can get from this world. It doesn't matter who I exploit, who I hurt, who I damage in doing that.
I once read that. I don't remember who it was, but he said that second coat in your closet actually belongs to the poor, and by having extra things like that, you're actually taking away from the poor. You should be giving a lot of this excess to the poor.
Right. I mean, there is a limited number of resources in the world, right? Yeah. So when we're hoarding, when we're taking everything, then somebody else is, in a way, is being deprived of that. So there really is this lack of sense of responsibility, and so the opposite virtue for this is, of course, is generosity, just generosity, and being able to give, to share freely with others with what I have. And I think an important sense here is called stewardship. You know, we hear that a lot in the church, and it's right. You know, what I have has been entrusted to me. In a way, it has been entrusted to me. God has, in a way, given me these things so that I may use for the benefit of others and for His glory. So we should try to think of everything that we have has been entrusted to us by God. We are stewards. We're not really owners, because God has given it to us to be used in a way that's going to glorify Him and to help others. And so that we can freely share with others with what we have, knowing that they're really not ours, but have been entrusted to us.
And here during Lent, this is a great time to really take stock of this and to look to be more generous as far as almsgiving, you know, give to the poor.
Right.
Now's a great time to look at that in
and
our life.
I'm so grateful for our Lenten practices, right? Almsgiving, charity, works of charity really helps us to go beyond ourselves, to learn to be less greedy and to be more generous with others. And another sense with stewardship is solidarity, right? That we're all connected somehow with our families, with our friends, with our community, with somebody on the other side of the world. Right, and so there's a sense of solidarity. If somebody else is suffering and I can help them, then I should help them. Right? And this greed, as you know, can give way offsprings to many other vices, like thefts. You know, I feel like I can cheat people, lie, fraud, just to gain things for my benefit. There's this exaggerated notion of my rights, right? I just have a right to everything, and so there's this injustice. You know, when one lives with this greed, one just acts unjustly with others because you don't really recognize the rights of others. You're just concerned about yourself and your desires.
Very helpful. Very helpful. So, so what is our next deadly sin?
The next one is envy. Envy. Now, this is not the type of envy that we talk about. Sometimes we say to somebody, you know, hey, I envy you. Well, this is not something that we would readily admit because this is pretty ugly. This is being sad or distressed because somebody has something that I don't have, but somehow that diminishes my worth. There's a sense that because you have a nice car and I don't, somehow that diminishes my value and my worth. And so and I desire what you have so much where I would even wish evil upon you. I would wish something bad would happen to you, and I would rejoice in any thing that would happen to you. So this is sort of an ugly envy.
Yeah. I've never heard it described that way, actually. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it, compared to just plain old, she's better looking than me or smarter or something like that. That's not what you're saying. You're saying it goes deeper than that, wishing that something bad would happen to them, that they wouldn't be so beautiful.
A couple examples is Cain versus Abel, right? So Cain was so envious of Abel that he killed his brother. Right, it led to murder. Right, not only was he wishing him harm, but he actually carried it out. So you really despise that person. It's really malicious. You really want harm to that person that has something that you don't. You know, whether it be respect, status, wealth, whatever. It really is horrible. And the other one is the religious leaders were envious of Jesus. In a way, right? That he was being recognized and so on. And so both of those examples led to murder, right? The first murder and then the murder of the Son of God.
So would this be considered envy in a kind of a smaller scale than that, obviously murder. But for example, let's say you're envious of someone for being very successful. And so as a result, you start gossiping about that person or saying something negative about them. Well, you know, they cheated on their husband, or well, whatever, you know. Would that be considered
Yes.
envy?
Yes,
Because we're actually hurting their character
Right.
in the fact
So
that
that's one of the offsprings of envy is defamation.
Okay. Yeah.
Really talking bad about another to harm their reputation, right?
I see. Yeah.
Even if it's true,
Mhm.
you shouldn't say it unless there's a good reason to say it. You know, if it's a crime you're trying to prevent or something like that.
Yeah.
But here it is malicious. You're trying to hurt somebody's reputation, and then a lot of times it's false too. You're just spreading lies just to hurt somebody's reputation, whether it be their work, whether it be their marriage, even among their friends. There's backbiting too. You like to sow discord, right? You like to say something so that somebody else would be angry at Jenny because you don't like her, right?
Yeah,
You just like, and so just plant a seed so that somebody else may dislike you, and so it's
I can see how that's a lot more common,
Right.
or very common.
right.
Yeah.
And it just a more subtle sense of that is maybe just being hypercritical. You know, sometimes we could be envious of somebody and we're just hypercritical of them. You know, like gossip or talking bad about them or just being hypercritical when we're envious. Maybe they have something that we don't, and now we're just being super hypercritical because we really don't like them because we're envious. So yeah, something to be aware of. The virtue for envy, the opposite virtue for envy is charity. Is really is charity, is to be happy, to rejoice in for others for what they have. You know, if whatever you have, I'm happy for you. So that's the virtue of charity.
Sounds good. And what's the next one?
The next one is sloth. So we tend to think of sloth as lazy or laziness, but this is a different type of laziness that they talk about. St. Thomas talks about. It's more of a spiritual laziness rather than a physical laziness, or it's more of a spiritual laziness. I like to use the word apathy. It's almost it's apathetic, apathy. So it's lethargy or a lack of interest or indifference to our responsibilities to God and to others. It's sort of this I don't care attitude. Even God's goodness, everything holy, is sort of a turnoff. I don't want to go to church. I don't want to pray. Holiness is not attractive. Just God and His goodness and all that is a big turnoff. So it's sort of a rejection of God's charity. So we have to be careful with sloth or apathy, because sometimes it's voluntary. So it's a vice and it's a sin when it's voluntary. But we suffer a lot from depression. People have depression, chemical imbalance. It's a disease, right? Or trauma, or physical ailment, or something like that. And so there's a lot at work here. There's the emotional, the psychological, the chemical. There's a lot at work here. But to the sense that it is voluntary, that I'm just giving in to this, like despair. Is disillusionment, despair, are offsprings of this sloth or this apathy. Sometimes there's instinctual. Sometimes I can feel lazy. I don't want to pray the rosary or whatever. But you have to kind of not give in to that.
So what would the virtue be, the opposite of that?
So the virtue here is really hope. Is really hope, because apathy or sloth, you're giving into despair, discouragement, and so now it's hope. Okay, if I do something, God can make it better, right? My hope is in the Lord. I know that I can at least do something. That life isn't as bleak or meaningless as I'm making it out to be, right? So a lot of times people just they lose this purpose in life, this meaning in life, this bleakness, this darkness, and so you got to have that hope, right? That things will turn out well, things will look up, things will get better. So hope is an essential virtue to overcoming apathy and sloth. Another one is patience. Patience, just to put up with things. The things that we deal with from day to day. Sometimes people just give in to all the stress and the discouragement and the suffering, and they just tune out, right? And it's just to be patient that this too will pass, right? So hope, patience, and also gratitude. Gratitude, right? Gratitude for things that we do have, and to count our blessings. Because once you get into that darkness, you can't even see the blessings, and you can't be grateful. You forget to be grateful for the things that you do have.